Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. This is your host, Rachel Jameson. I have with me today someone from the Homestead Front Porch Group, and that's where we met, Jonah Curtis. Welcome, Jonah.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I wanted to interview you because I see all your posts in the group, and it just looks like you're doing some really cool things there. Can you tell me like how much acreage you have and what kind of things you're doing there and what animals and I don't know what else you're doing there?
Okay. So we've got just a little under 8 acres and we have multiple gardens of, a couple different types. And then we're doing, I've started recently, we have fruit trees, and brambles and berry bushes. And then we're adding some tree guilds. Our fruit trees have been pretty traditional so far. We did get a ton of peaches this year, but we're adding some tree guilds. And we've got a couple of ponds. So we have fish in there. And then we raise Nigerian dwarf dairy goats. We have egg-laying chickens. And then we raise meat chickens, turkeys for meat. We don't breed pigs anymore, but we buy feeder pigs every year and raise a few for meat. And then we raise rabbits for meat and fur. So that's, and honeybees. Also, we have honeybees. And there are probably other things I'm forgetting that I'll remember as we go. Right. Oh, mushrooms. We're growing, we've been growing mushrooms the last couple of years too.
Oh, wow. You have that acreage really packed then. That's really cool.
Yeah, a lot of it, we've tried to be as like symbiotic with things as possible and use things where they want to be. Like I've tried to grow mushrooms in a couple different spots and they weren't happy. So the spot where they do want to be is wet and full of poison ivy, but they're really happy there. I don't really get it. So it doesn't really bother me, but it seems to keep the deer away, even though they eat some poison ivy. But yeah. But yeah, we kind of have everything. It wasn't as planned out as, if you were to tell me, okay, you're going to live here for the rest of your life, build this thing as efficiently as possible. It's probably not exactly how we do it, right. But we're really trying to work with things that were already kind of there and the way the land is and make things as smooth as possible.
Okay. Yeah. Is your property, so you said you have ponds, is your property hilly or flat or wooded?
It was very wooded. We bought a sawmill. So on my property, it's not just my wife and children and me. My mother and father-in-law live here also. So it's our property together, and we work together. And I really, not that we don't ever have problems or butt heads or anything, but it really works out well to have energy, wisdom, and experience, and all those things kind of mixed together. I really like that lifestyle. But that being said, so there was some stuff here when I first moved here, 17 years ago now. But we bought a little sawmill, and so we took some trees out, and there were already ponds here. Okay. We're near a river, but things kind of slope down. Our house is kind of toward the road and things kind of slope down. And so it's mix of wooded and some wet areas. And then, the gardens and blackberries and raspberries and all that stuff is in the open.
Your property sounds a lot like our property. That's why I asked, because we have ponds and brambles and we have they're there naturally, but we don't have any fish in ours. So did you plant the fish?
Yes. Yep. Some of them. There were some in there when I got here, but just mainly bullhead. And so we've planted some other stuff in there. And then there was a big flood a few years ago, and some fish kind of came up from the river into it. It wasn't a flood enough to damage anything, but it was just basically a super, super wet spring. But some fish kind of ran up into our ponds from there. But yeah, we planted quite a few.
Okay, that's cool. And
it's pretty self-sustaining now. Oh yeah, it's definitely we eat.
Okay.
Quite a lot of fish out of there now. It's pretty self-sustaining. In fact, at this point, we have to kind of keep up on fishing it, or you can have they can get stunted. There can be problems there.
Yeah. Is your pond really big? Do you have any idea?
No. So we have three. One is pretty small. It's
Okay.
I couldn't even tell you. It's probably 25 feet across is all, like basically 25 by 30 foot.
Okay.
And then the other one is probably a little over twice that size. They're all spring fed. And so they're and the middle ones are swimming pond. It's kind of like a figure eight shape. And then the bigger one is probably, I don't know, 40 or so feet across by maybe a little over 100 feet long. It's not that big. None of them are that big, but they're fairly deep, 12 feet deep in the middle or so.
Oh,
And
that's
they're,
pretty good. Yeah, ours, we have several, but only two of them really stay all year throughout the summer.
okay.
The one in the back might be spring fed, but I think the other one is more just drainage fed.
Gotcha.
So we'll see. And it's not that deep. So I don't know. When we had Nicholas Ferguson up at our property, he suggested a place for us to put one. So we still have to investigate that. But
Yeah. Well, it's worth, I love having them. They're fun for swimming. They're fun for fish.
yeah.
I have a garden right next to one of them. And so when it's dry, I did have a solar water system there, but it was always getting plugged up. It was always a problem. So I bought a trash pump or a semi trash pump.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now I can move 150 gallons of water. Or 150 gallons a minute. I do want to build a water tower on the other side of it with some of those IBC totes.
Oh, okay.
Or like a septic tank kind of a thing, and then fill that with my trash pump, and then have a passive drain system into my garden rather than blasting water all over them.
Yeah.
But I need time to build a water tower.
With ponds and stuff, there's so much gunk. Those pumps just get all icked up pretty quick. That's what happened to us. It happens here at our house, and then it's happened to us out there when we've tried to water from them. There's just so much sediment.
Yeah, exactly. I have a filter, and I have the filter attached to a buoy, so it's floating like halfway, neutrally buoyant, halfway between. But it's still like you can tell when there's stuff on the outside of that because the pressure decreases. And a pump that runs dry is not going to be a pump very long.
Right. Yeah.
So you got to balance that.
Yeah, it's happened to us so many times. We kind of gave up on we don't have any. We have the huge sprinkler heads, otherwise they gunk up. And yeah. But so you guys also have I was looking at one of your posts, and I thought this might be an interesting topic. So you have something called the Mastodon Garden.
Yeah, that's the one by that pond.
Explain why you call it that.
So when we were having that dug, but when was that? Oh, it must have been 8 or 9 years ago, 2015, maybe something like that. The excavator, I wasn't home, and I got home from work. I was backing into the driveway, and I saw my father-in-law like covered in mud and looking like a madman. And he had some giant stuff in a wheelbarrow. And I'm like, what on earth is he up to? And it was October because I was going to go hunting. And he made a crack about, oh, you're going to go hunting today? Going to get a big buck? We found a mastodon today. And I'm like, what? And we go down there, and there were, I'll share some pictures with you, but there was a chunk of tusk. There were a bunch of ribs. There was half of a pelvis, and a bunch of other bones. And then, from basically just a huge mastodon. It was on the news, like on M Live and some stuff. It was. So my father-in-law and the excavator are good friends, and they were the ones that found it. I just got to see it afterwards. But it was very cool, and I was so excited to show my wife. And then she was like, like dawdling. She got home, and I'm like, hey, you gotta go see this. And she's like, come on, I just want to change. I'm like, no, But yeah, so it was pretty exciting. And we hit go ahead.
What ended up happening to it?
So we still have, it basically got kind of shared around. So there was I guess quite a few mastodons actually get found in Michigan.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't really realize that either, but a paleontologist from U of M came over and like looked at it and told us the gist of it, that it was like 12,000 years old and it was a male. And well, and he was pointing out on there all these marks that he said were from, he's pretty confident that this was killed and consumed by humans, and that this whole area was a swamp at the time, and they'd probably like stored chunks of meat in chunks of hide and like buried it in the cold part of the swamp to kind of preserve it while they camped here for a long time and then consumed it. Which makes me feel like a total wuss if ever I'm like kind of having a bad day or whining about something. Like, well, I didn't have to kill a mastodon with a spear, today. So my day is not so tough.
You guys have your garden there now?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So it's right next to it. And yeah, that's just, we just kind of like, we have Mastodon Pond, Mastodon Garden, and then where one of our fruit tree guilds is Mastodon Hill, because it's where a lot of the soil got dumped before we started, they started finding bones sticking out of the bucket.
That is so fun, though. What a fun story to be able to pass down.
It was a pretty fun day. Yeah, it was a pretty fun day.
That is pretty fun. So you guys also, I was noticing that you have, you just kind of do everything. I'm kind of having a hard time deciding what to ask you next, but you do, I know that's something that's interesting. You guys do rabbits for fur?
Yep. So growing up, my grandpa was a taxidermist. Well, like his, hobby was taxidermy. And so I've always had an interest in it. And we were, when I was a kid too, if we killed anything, if we hunted anything, we had to utilize all of it. So like I have eaten, when I was real little, with a pellet gun, I've eaten chipmunks and tanned chipmunk hides. I've eaten many, many, many pine squirrels, red squirrels, and tanned their hides. And so with the rabbit hides, I've tanned them. We haven't done as much with them as I want. Like we've used some of them for, I've got some knives up here that my grandpa made, and we have some like rabbits in the boxes and the display boxes and things like that. But now with having the kids, I want to make some little rabbit quilts for them, for in the winter.
That would be so warm and soft. Oh my.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're kind of working on some of that. I mean, sometimes I don't always save them. If I don't have time or I don't have freezer space to store them before I tan them, I have no problem with composting them. But if I can, I like to tan them.
So I should have actually probably asked you this before, but did you grow up homesteading, and did you decide, is that what made you decide to do this? How did you get into homesteading?
Yeah, I came by it very honestly. So I grew up in like northern central Michigan, and kind of the same situation I have here. I grew up next door to my grandparents, or on the same property, same driveway, two houses. And we had 40 acres, and then we were right next to a huge section of state land. So pretty much I had miles and miles of backyard, but we didn't have, poor is relative. We were fine.
Yeah.
But there were certainly leaner times, and like raising venison, we raised rabbits for a while. We had chickens, and we fished, so hunting and then homesteading. And then we had tons of gardens. They really weren't, it wasn't a hobby. It was like, we needed to do this.
Right.
And I did appreciate it at the time. I always loved gardening. I love being out there. Like my grandpa was big time into it. And I love being out there with him. Some of my best memories of that, and then hunting with him. And so I've kind of always loved it. And then, I'm sure in high school, I probably wasn't the most useful because I had friends and jobs and sports and stuff. So, and then went away to college. But in the summer, I would come home and still help. But then, I kind of saw how things were, and my background. So my degree is in nutrition. So working with people and seeing how everything you put in your body and everything you consume, not just with your body, but with your mind too, how it affects your body and affects your mind. There was a way I wanted to be, and there was a way I didn't. And we've, since my wife and I met and, got married and have been here, I've been increasingly into it. And then, so we were a little backstory. We were married for 10 years and didn't think we could have children. We didn't know why. Everything seemed to be fine, but we didn't think we could have children. We wanted children. And then in 2020, I think it was because I shaved my head for so long, and then I quit shaving my head and grew my hair out. Instantly, she got pregnant. So we had, or maybe we just quit worrying about it. Who knows? Because we were kind of, thinking, okay, we're not going to have kids. What are we going to do with the second act of our lives, of our marriage, and kind of figure things out. And then, she told me she was pregnant, and so our son was born in fall of 2020. And then about 6 months later or whatever it was, she told me again. And so with children, it just adds so much more to it. Like, we give a lot of food, we share food with our in-law or with her folks, and then with my family too, and quite a few other people. But now with children, it just adds so much more value to why I'm doing these things and the way we want them to grow up. Our lifestyle is, I should say, non-traditional, but it's really actually kind of traditional. That we work, but we have our children with us at home, and we do a lot of stuff outside together with them, and make sure that they know where the food comes from. And that has added so much value to me when I'm outside with, when we're outside with the kids. They will go through and have, like just this week, they've eaten kale, Swiss chard, grapes, cherry tomatoes, blueberries, carrots, onions, and I'm sure, summer squash. My daughter is apparently half woodchuck because she'll eat a whole summer squash in the garden. And that's all stuff that they just had outside with us in the garden, like not even stuff in the house. That's just eating as they're wandering around through the gardens.
Yeah.
And you just can't put a price on that. For me, it's worth all the work.
No, you can't. My kids were raised like that too. And it is. And I think when kids are involved in it, they're more likely to eat that healthy food because they see it growing, and they're more likely to try new things than saying, oh, I don't like that. But if they helped grow it,
definitely,
they're willing to try it. Of course, your kids are going to grow up not even knowing the difference anyways, because they're pretty little. So they won't even know the difference. They'll just have always ate it.
Yeah. Well, I did, I worked for a hospital for quite a few years, and one of my pet project there was I built a community garden. Oh. And so I taught like senior gardening classes for a couple of years, but then I taught, I think for 10 or 12 years, I taught kids gardening classes. Most of them were like 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. And it was kind of like a joke that people would bring me their picky eaters, kids who only like hot dogs and chicken nuggets, but then they're out there and they're eating radishes and they're eating kale, like stuff that a lot of people don't always love, but they grew it. So they had that sense of ownership and that sense of pride and just that connection to it. And I'm a believer too. I think, it's nice with the veggies and all those things, like you're more connected, but I think you owe it to the food you eat to occasionally see that your food dies. It's a little dark to think of sometimes, but it's not like everyone should slaughter all their own animals and everything. But I think people forget that something died for your dinner. And we can kind of get disconnected from that. And even with vegetables, I feed a lot of chipmunks to my chickens every summer because they're in my gardens. And so no matter what you're eating, something died for your dinner. And I think it's easy to disconnect from that and remove yourself from life, and people forget that part of it.
Yeah. I agree. We've hunted and fished our entire marriage. And then I started helping friends and learning how to butcher and stuff like that. And people have a hard time understanding. They're like, you do that just for fun? And I'm like, well, not really for fun. It's not fun. I don't dread it, but I certainly don't enjoy taking a life. But it's part of, I'm a meat eater, so I feel like it's responsible for me to take part in that, to understand what I'm doing and not be removed from the process of where my food comes from. Yeah,
exactly. we had my wife's aunt stayed with us for I don't know, it was a week or so ago, and she stayed with us for almost 2 weeks. Um, and she's a city girl for sure. And then now lives on the East Coast, and just the sweetest gal, and was loving being around with the kids. But we had our meat chickens. We have a little chicken tractor, and it was getting to be time. And I usually just kind of get up early and get started. And then, now with the kids, my wife's main job is to wrangle them. They'll kind of help, but it's not really very efficient. And then, but my in-laws will help, but I kind of didn't want to bother them either, because she was staying with them more than us.
Right.
And they saw what I was doing though. And this gal wanted to come out and help. And she brought up a chair, rolled up her sleeves, and was getting after it. And then we had chicken dinner that she wanted to eat, a chicken that she butchered, that she helped butcher. So we had chicken for supper that night, and it was pretty cool to see. It made me pretty happy.
That is really awesome. See, you might know this if you listen to the podcast, but I wasn't raised like this either. But my husband was. And so he's had a big influence on me. But I love the life now, but it's certainly not how I was raised. And it's definitely a different, coming from the city or town. And so that's amazing that she decided to do that. That's huge.
Yeah, she was a real sport about it. I mean, she was all in. She was fully committed. She wasn't done until we were done, and they were all in the cooler and wrapped up. Yeah, my wife didn't really grow up. She grew up on this property out in the country. But it was a little bit different than, my take on homesteading. I'm probably a little more extreme than what they grew up, but she loves having the food and being out there together as a family. That's our big thing, is we don't split up very often. We do a lot of things together as a family.
Yeah.
And she loves seeing how our children enjoy, quality food. Like, they got up from their nap today and were scarfing wild blackberries that I picked yesterday.
Well, and they're going to thrive so much there. I feel like, anyways, their health is going to be so much better because they're just eating that food at its peak of ripeness and nutrition, because there is no truck between their food and where it's coming from. They're like getting it the second it comes off the vine.
Yep. Well, not only that, like the structure of our bodies are made to be used. So if all we eat are soft processed foods, our facial muscles are underdeveloped. And then it can even affect bone structure. It can really mess with things. It can affect your teeth. We're made to be chewing actual, meat and vegetables and fruits, not just purees and processed mush.
Yeah.
It makes a difference to eat. We evolved for, whatever belief system you have, but we evolved for a very, very long time to eating these things, nuts and berries and fruits and vegetables and meats. And then in the last 70 years or so, we're like, forget all that. We'll just have Velveeta and Slurpees, and we'll totally be fine. Never chewing or eating actual food again.
Boneless meat and
yeah, and mush. And it would take 1,000 years of eating that stuff before our bodies would evolve to work through that. And we're not there. And that's, there's a lot of likely a lot of diseases and physiological issues we have, and even possibly psychological issues we have, that are based on just eating foods that our bodies just aren't prepared for.
Yeah. Or even food that's not really food. It's just chemicals.
Yeah. Food like substances. Exactly. Yeah.
So you guys have dairy goats. Do you use that dairy like just for food, or do you use it for other things?
So the kids don't drink it yet.
Okay.
Because I don't pasteurize. So it's filtered, but it's raw. And I'm sure they could, but I've kind of taken it easy on that.
Yeah.
Not that we've ever had any issue. but I think I'm just kind of pacing that. They do eat, we make a lot of yogurt with it, and they'll eat that,
Okay.
but that has been heated, so it's essentially been pasteurized. And then I'll make a couple different cheeses, mostly mozzarella, just like the 30-minute mozzarella cheese with it. And then other than that, we've made soap in the past using it, but not in a while, although we've been talking about it again because we have a bunch of lard in the freezer from our pigs last year. So we're thinking about making some soap again.
Oh, that's
But I
nice.
I drink the milk every day. Oh, it is. It is. It's kind of a pain to make, and it's very much a pain to be patient for it to actually cure. I have not historically been very good at that. I'm like, I want to use it.
Yeah. But it feels so good on your skin. And then when you
Yeah.
add, I haven't tried it with goat's milk, but I have used milk. So I've made a
Mhm.
milk, lard, and tallow soap, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we did it. We haven't done it with the Nigerians, so we switched to Nigerians 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Before that, we had La Manchas and a couple other breeds, but mostly La Manchas. But the issue was, and this has kind of been an overarching homesteading theme, I think, for a lot of folks. But we had too much milk.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't have time to put it all up. Some was being spoiled. I mean, we'd feed it to the pigs and we'd feed it to the chickens, but it was being spoiled and it was taking up a ton of fridge space. So we switched to Nigerians who have a higher milk fat content. So my gosh, is it good in my coffee every morning? And it's just a lower yield.
Okay.
And and we've been, I think most homesteaders, and I talked to a lot of like people who are kind of newer at it, and you're so excited. And so then you just reach and grab everything and you want to do it all and have all the animals and all the stuff. And then what in the heck do you do with it all? And so we're kind of in that phase now where we've been doing this a long time, and it's trying to um, find exactly what we're going to use and be efficient with and not waste, because it's pretty frustrating to spend a bunch of time doing something and money on something,
Right.
and then time and or not time, not money, but time harvesting it and then having it just go bad. It's a little silly to waste your time and on both ends of it. And now we have the chaos factor of a couple of kids who so um there's some X factors in there that are going to change as they get older on how much time they can help or how much time we need to spend with them doing other things, and then how much they'll consume. But yeah, that's kind of where we're landing on a lot of our homestead stuff now. Is we know about how much we're going to eat and use and how much time, and it's trying to find the balance of maybe reining things in a little bit, because we bred pigs for a couple years. I don't care for it. It just wasn't something that we wanted to use our time with. So now we buy feeders. Um, we're kind of in that area of homesteading, of finding, okay, what exactly are we going to do?
That's cool. I think everybody has to figure out what works for them and their family, because every homestead isn't going to look the same. And that's cool that you've changed your mind on a few things, and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough sometimes. Like when we were done breeding the pigs, we had to actually cut out some infrastructure. We had pens set up for breeding and for to have everybody separated. And so when we were cutting it out, there was a little bit of that feeling like, oh, this is a failure. But it's just not a failure if it's something that it's not your passion.
Yeah.
Um,
Perfect.
I love having the rabbits, and we kind of dipped our toe in initially, and like, okay, how is this going to work? Do we really want them? Will there be enough meat production to make it worth it? Can we feed them enough from here without having to buy? I mean, we still have to buy some feed, but
Right.
and we liked it. So then we built a different iteration of the cages, out of just kind of what we had, and it was cheap. We had a lot of scrap wood and scrap stuff laying around, but then it just wasn't quite right. So then this year we built a whole new setup, and it's finding what works for you and the right way to do it, and kind of to make it easy on everybody, where you don't want to resent a task.
Yeah, that I think is huge, is if you start to resent something, then something needs to change, or maybe you just need to do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys, I mean, you keep mentioning the kids, and I don't know if we mentioned, I think we talked about this before we started the podcast, but your kids are pretty little.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're like toddlers.
Toddlers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're pretty little. So you're very busy with toddlers and all these animals. You mentioned that you have lots of extra food, and I remember seeing a post about you guys freeze drying.
Yes.
Is there a reason you
yeah.
decided to get that? A freeze dryer, and what do you guys use that for?
So I've actually wanted one. You know, I've seen them in Mother Earth News for like a decade and wanted one. And for a number of reasons, I used to go backpacking a lot. I'd spend a lot of my time in the mountains and in the woods hiking, and I still go out west and hunt and or go camping now, have backpacking freeze dried meals. And so I kind of wanted to make my own because I don't always love them. And you know, when I first, and this is showing my age, when I first started, freeze dried meals were pretty cheap. They're like $15 or $20 a piece now. They're crazy expensive.
It's crazy.
Go to a restaurant. Excuse me. So I kind of wanted for that, but that all might be just mostly an excuse that I just kind of wanted one. I think they're cool. And so I've wanted one for a long time. And then we have a number of chest freezers. And a couple of years ago, I was out west on a hunting trip and called home to talk to my wife. I can't remember if I'd got anything, what it was. I don't remember exactly. Maybe I was calling a check-in, but she had gone into the shop and realized there was a chest freezer in there that she didn't know existed. And she wasn't mad, but she was like kind of goofing with me. I'm like, hey, you know, out of all the secrets I could possibly have, the fact that I have an extra freezer full of zucchini and black raspberries is not that big of a deal. You know, that's the worst secret I have. And so we have a number of freezers, and she told me that if I get another one, you know, I might end up living in one. So she's a very sweet woman, but she might harm me. But the freeze dryer was kind of just to start preserving things really long term. And you know, at that point we were starting to get more mushrooms, and it's a really good way to preserve mushrooms.
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of snacks for the kids too. So we got it. It's only been a little over a year. So we'll do freeze dried apples, pears, peaches, strawberries, and blackberries, black raspberries, all kinds of stuff like that for snacks for the kids. Especially for like if we're traveling.
Yeah.
And then yogurt. And then eggs, scrambled eggs. So
I wondered if you did any of the milk. So you do the yogurt.
I'll do the yogurt. I've done the milk too. And I'll just stir it in my coffee and it's fine. But I haven't totally reconstituted it like to drink it as milk, but I just stir it into my coffee. The eggs work really well. Freeze-dried eggs, scrambled eggs. And then we've done a few meals, lots of zucchini. Just chunks of zucchini or shredded zucchini to put into soups. Kale and Swiss chard, beets, stuff like that I'm going to mix into soups or stir fries. I mean, and none of it is, well, some of it comes out really good when you reconstitute it. Some of it is fine, but there's a lot of nutrition in there too.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I do a lot of canning and stuff, but I know that freeze drying is definitely, I mean, as far as nutrition, freeze drying is the best way to preserve food because it retains most of the nutrition.
Yeah. Yep. It works really well for that. The freeze dried pear slices are the single best snack I've ever eaten. They are absolutely fantastic.
It's funny because Ed and I were just talking about in the last podcast how the dried pears were his favorite, and you're saying the freeze dried.
They're like candy. They're unbelievable. My wife likes the freeze dried watermelon more. The kids don't care. They're down for all of it.
Yeah, right.
You know, they really, I think they probably like the freeze dried blackberries or black raspberries the best.
Do they cost a lot to run, like electricity wise?
Yeah, they do. It can vary a little bit, but it's not a crazy amount. Okay. So like we have a kiln. You can really watch when we're doing pottery. You can
watch your little thing.
Oh yeah. I
What
mean,
do you
that thing
guys,
gets crazy.
what do you make
And
with
so,
the kiln?
my wife's a potter, so
Oh my
she's an
goodness.
artist and
Okay.
does pottery.
Fun.
And then we have like some power tools that are, like a table saw and a planer that use a lot of power.
Oh yeah.
So compared to those, the freeze dryer is not that bad. I think when I first looked, I can't remember exactly, but basically for like a 24-hour cycle, it's a couple of dollars.
Oh, that's not terrible. Not as bad as I was thinking
No,
it would be.
no, it's not like it's $20 to run or anything like that.
And
No,
that's
it's not
and then
crazy.
that's like how many trays does yours have?
So ours is a medium, and I guess their new mediums now have 5 trays. Ours has 4.
Okay.
But it's, in a cycle can run, it depends on what you're doing, the moisture content, but it can go anywhere from, 24 hours, probably it can go a little shorter than that sometimes, but sometimes it can take almost, 36 hours or even more,
Oh, okay.
depending
It's
on what you have
probably,
in there.
yeah, I would guess like pears and watermelon probably take longer.
They're not as bad. The things that have taken the longest for me are things that have different densities in there. Like I've done soup, leftover soup. That seems to take forever because the meat takes a long time. If the pears aren't bad, if you put them in and they're almost dry, you check on them, and then I'll flip them and put them back in for another dry cycle, and then they're done pretty fast.
Okay. Okay.
But the meats can take a long time. I just did. I had some elderberry juice that was
Nice.
from last year in the freezer, and so I freeze dried that so I can have like a powder to mix in for this winter for kind of immune support.
Yeah.
And that took a little while. I probably added more liquid in there than I should have. I should have had it spread out a little thinner in the trays,
Okay.
but it worked out pretty well.
Now, do you guys just store those in vacuum bags, or do you use like the Mylar bags with the zips, or?
It depends on how long before we're planning on using it. So I'll do some just in mason jars.
Yeah, that's true.
And then I'll do some just vacuum sealer bags, and I'll use the little air packs in all of them, like a desiccant.
Moisture
And
absorbers, yeah.
moisture absorbers, yeah, or oxygen absorbers or whatever, yeah. And then for long-term stuff, I'll do the Mylar bags.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I haven't yet gotten the bug, but sometimes I think maybe it would be a good idea.
It's pretty cool, and it's so shelf stable, and it's so much. I mean, I do a lot of canning too,
Yeah.
but we've kind of run out of real estate for any more jars too. And my wife also won't let me add any more pantries. No more pantries. She said, we got to do.
I hear you. I probably have 2,000 jars.
That's a lot
of space. Yeah. Well, when all the kids were home, once your kids get older, they eat more. When all the kids were home, and yeah, I don't have any other way to store it. So it's everything from meat to vegetables to fruit. And we only had one freezer at the time. So yeah, that's what you did.
Yeah. And we do a lot of canning. I kind of enjoy canning. Like I've got some stuff I want to can tomorrow.
Too,
yeah. But the freeze drying it's nice because that stuff is so shelf stable. You can, and when it's in the jars, it's still a jar that you have to put somewhere. But when it's in the Mylar bags or the vacuum sealer bags, you can put it anywhere. You can put it in your sock drawer. It'll last forever. It's like you don't have to think about it. It's so light.
You don't have to worry about breaking the jar.
Right.
The seal. Yeah. There's a lot. I see a lot of pros to it. Now, speaking of canning, I've also seen pictures of your canning kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
That's something I have big plans for in the future.
That's one of my favorite places to be.
Yeah, that is great. I love it.
It's nothing special, really. It was mostly like we'd wanted one for a while. So I did a little demolition job where I tore down something for a guy. So I kept some of the wood from that, and then did a couple other things kind of similar. And we just kind of held on to some materials. Right. We do some shopping at the scrapyard sometimes, and like, we've bought a couple lawnmowers there and like brought them home and fixed them and ran them. And
yep.
But there was the sink that's in my outdoor kitchen was from a milk parlor So it's a big stainless steel. It's got 2 basins and then like a flat countertop section.
Oh, that's cool.
And then most of the other stuff was just we bought the hardware cloth for it. But a lot of the other stuff was just cheap or free or salvage materials. And then just propane burners out there. And I don't mind canning in the house, but now with the kids, it's not the canning's really dangerous, but they're running around and there's hot things on the stove all the time.
Yeah.
And then we're take your pick, either too cheap or too poor for air conditioning. So I don't want to heat the house up all summer long. Yeah. So the outdoor kitchen is perfect for that. And I can kind of come in and out. And so we have 3 propane burners out there. That's actually like a Camp Chef stove that I can can on. I can can on all 3 of them if I wanted to at the same time. And then I have an old cast iron stovetop that was my grandparents that they used to take up into the mountains with them when they were hunting. Like they'd go out west. My grandpa would get a mule deer, and my grandmother would can the whole dang mule deer at camp. He's up at spike camp. She'd at like their base camp. She'd can the darn thing at their camp there and they'd just come home with like 40 jars for a mule deer. And then he'd go get whatever else.
That is such a cool story.
I've got pictures. My grandparents were wild. They were serious about stuff like that.
That's cool.
But so I have that cast iron stove, and that one you can definitely can on it, but I prefer it for simmering because the Camp Chef stove I have gets way too hot. I have some plates on there to kind of keep things. Yeah. But the other one's great for simmering. Like I'm going to make some blackberry jam out there, and I actually might not be able to make it out there tomorrow because my garlic is hanging right above that, and so there might be some dirt in the jam if I do it on that side. So I might have to make the jam in the house and take it out the can. But then I like that
idea a lot.
Oh, the outdoor kitchen is so worth it. Keeps the house cool, and it's just a nice space. I can store all my jars out there when they're not in use, and just kind of keep everything in the house tidy.
It has a roof.
What's that? Yep. It's a steel roof. Yep.
That's cool.
Yep. And it's just a little shack, but it works out really well. It's just off the house. And there's no running water, but I have an RV hose, so it's clean water, and it's coming from our hose bib, and it goes right to it, so it's pretty easy to hook up and be off and running.
That's awesome. I'm envious of that. We have air conditioning, but still I hate heating up the house.
Oh yeah.
But then I can cool it back down. It just doesn't really make sense. So I can on our porch, but it's certainly not a canning kitchen. So I do everything inside, and then I take the canner out to the porch to can, and it's pretty hot, and there's no roof over it or anything. But
the roof is nice. Well, and I can do it in the rain. But the other thing, like when I was canning in the house, I like to cook too. So having one pot going to sterilize jars and then a canner going, or if I have 2 canners going, that stove is out of commission. There's really not room to do much else on there. Exactly.
Yeah. And I like having part of the mess, at least, outside. And I just like being outside anyways. I could live outside without the 4 walls around me all the time. I just love to be outside. So that's one of the things I don't like about canning is it drags me inside. So the idea of having an outdoor canning kitchen, it's like, oh, I can just be outside in nature and still be canning.
Yep. And I've had some of my best naps in like a camp chair, one of those like folding chairs out there. I've had some top-notch naps out there.
Note to self, hammock out there.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
That would be amazing. Get one of those hammocks out there. So you guys have what kind of fruit trees do you have? Obviously you have a peach tree. You talked about that. You probably have pears too?
Yep. So we've got peach, apple, pear. We just planted some pawpaw.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we'll see. They don't look. I just don't. Oh man, those things just look like sticks still. Um, we've got some persimmon. We've got plums. Well, a lot of them start with P. I think that's
Do you have
it.
apples?
And yeah, we have apples. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Nice.
and we
That's a
planted
great
quite a few
selection.
more apple trees this year, and then a few more plum trees. And I so I did a couple of tree guilds, and then on the Mastodon Garden, I'm putting along the fence row on the north side. I'm putting some apple trees, but we're doing some pear trees that we're not really going to prune, and we're just going to kind of let them do their thing. Wildlife can have some. We might put some. We might even fence them in sometime, put some pigs or something under them. We'll pick what we can
Yeah,
pick, and
good
whatever
idea.
falls, falls.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's cool. You guys have a lot. I'd love to see your property. It's looking real. It sounds so cool.
Stop by sometime if you ever
Yeah,
make it
might have to drive down there.
Southern Michigan.
Yeah, because you guys, I mean, you might be one of the closest people that I know of that listen. So that's kind of cool to have you. Jordy is us as closer, I think, but you guys are both pretty close. But so you also have the mushrooms. What kind of mushrooms do you grow? Do you do just the logs, or do you do in wood chips?
So we've been doing the logs. Those are the only ones that are really producing right now. Shiitake and then golden oyster.
Nice.
And then we've inoculated. I really love the shiitake. Those are my favorite, and they're pretty stable. Like with the oysters, if you don't get them very quickly, they can get bad fast. Like the shiitake they can make it a minute in the fridge. And then we've done lion's mane, um, chicken of the woods, and part of it is I hunt a lot and I like to forage. So some of these mushrooms I find when I'm foraging. So I wanted to have some like a more reliable source though.
Yeah, I love
Um,
mushrooms. They're so tasty.
yeah,
You got lion's mane. That's cool.
yep. So that's just getting started, and then we did one on wood chips, and I can't remember it, but it's essentially like a portobello.
Is it
Um,
wine cap?
Wine cap is one of them, and there was another one. Yeah, I've kind of gone. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, but in the last few years, and maybe it's the drive of having children. I've kind of pushed it into another gear with planting a bunch more trees and getting more mushrooms and stuff going on.
Yeah.
Um,
How many
I
fruit
it's
trees do you have now?
say again.
How many fruit trees do you have now?
Oh boy,
It sounds like a lot.
yeah. Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
Um, producing or of like production size, probably a dozen or so. And then of younger ones that are kind of on their way, probably 3 dozen more.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool. My
So
plans
there,
were for mine were to be feeding animals too. So yeah, I like that whole pair idea with the pigs and stuff.
yeah. And then mulberries. We've got a couple mulberry trees, but I actually planted one with my son this spring, and I don't know, I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't even notice that there was a wild one growing like 6 feet away.
Oh,
And so we went and showed my mother-in-law, hey, we planted, just so you know, we planted a mulberry tree here and we're showing where we planted some stuff. And she goes, well, did you plant this one? I'm like, no. And it's huge. And I didn't even notice it right there. It was like totally, it was on a fence line, of course. So a bird planted it. But that one's been very productive for, I haven't really been, I haven't been really like pollarding it or anything. I've just been like kind of pruning as I go and taking it in to feed to the rabbits.
okay.
Um,
Does yours
and
get produce fruit?
that one does not yet. We have a couple others that do.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I love mulberries. So we make wine too. And
Okay.
I'll do like, a lot of fruit wines, and I'll do some apple mulberry, or we'll make mead, and I'll do like a mulberry mead. And I know not everyone loves mulberries because they're, I mean, I think they're really good, but not everyone's a big fan. But they're really good in fruit wines, and they add a lot of color.
We have a mulberry tree on our lot line here in town, and it produces lots and lots and lots of berries, and I love them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty good. We have tons and tons of blackberries, and I was considering trying blackberry mead.
Oh,
Because
yes.
we're gonna have so many blackberries. It is insane. Probably this week they'll probably start. Well, last weekend I picked like a handful of them, but this weekend they're really gonna start. And there's gonna be. I will never be able to pick them all. The bears will be eating them too. So but I
The
was like, what
wild
can I do
ones.
with all these? Yeah, they're wild.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they
My,
just
my hands
grow.
are all scratched up because I've been out.
Yeah,
Our wild blackberries are ready and they're
yeah.
over my head and I'm just
There's
wading
so
through.
many of them, and I've got scratches all over my legs from them. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna pick them, and I was like, what do I do with all these? And I was like, maybe I should try my hand at meat. I hear it's not too hard.
Oh, no, it's not hard at all.
Huh.
No,
Well,
it's
I'll
not
have
hard
to
at all.
hit you
And
up for some questions.
I do it that easy. So I have people who are way more experienced than me at making meads and stuff, but I do it the easy way with like a champagne yeast. And you can put fruit in early or you can put it in late. If you put it in late, it'll be a little bit sweeter. I mean, there's different ways to do it, but it's all, I, I like it. I think it's, people say it's an acquired taste. Because it's often not all that sweet, but I think it's fantastic. We have it chilled. It's kind of like a go-to when we have guests over, like a dinner drink.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, sounds like you guys do just about everything there. Is it?
Yeah, I don't know. There's probably things we don't, but we like to do kind of a variety of things, and we don't watch TV. I mean, we own a TV, but we don't watch anything, and we'll watch YouTube on our phones while we're doing the dishes is about the extent of it.
Yeah.
So like no programming or anything. And if you don't do that kind of stuff, and you don't really have any hobbies outside of like homesteading and hunting and fishing, you have a lot of time to get some stuff done.
Yeah.
It does add up if you can just kind of keep busy and keep working at it.
Yeah, an hour here, an hour there. So are you guys both working full time then? And
Yes.
homesteading? Okay.
Yep.
Off the homestead?
Yep.
Okay. Wow. You guys are busy then. Yeah.
It's we both have most of our summers off though.
Oh, okay. Now
Yep.
how do you, and you work for a hospital, so you still get the summers?
Not anymore. No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We work. She's a teacher and I work like in a similar field.
Okay, so that's definitely is nice, especially for homesteaders.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
My father-in-law, who my husband obviously grew up homesteading, but it was a different kind of homesteading. They used chemicals and stuff like that because his parents grew up in the Depression or just after the Depression. So that was the way to go because it was easier. But anyways, his dad was a principal. So he had the summers off and they homesteaded all summer long. They did tons and tons of gardens and fruit and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, that works out really well. I miss when I worked at the hospital, I could take like most of October off to go hunting.
Yeah.
So I don't get to do that anymore, but
yeah,
the trade-off is worth it because it's wonderful to be home with my family in the summer, but we can get a lot done. And my gardens have never been more fruitful than having time to be out there every day. And well, especially in Michigan, this early summer, late spring, it was so gosh darn dry that we were watering every day. And if I weren't here to water, it would have been rough.
It's definitely, we've had weird 2 years. I don't know if you had the drought last year too, but we've had 2 years in a row where we went weeks and weeks without rain. And then this heat, which we're not used to this far north. I mean, we get some heat, but this dry and heat, I mean, rain in Michigan, rain just usually falls from the sky. So the last couple of years have been pretty rough for us. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. And it's been, it was a big difference growing up, knowing how to garden in like Osceola, Wexford County, like northern lower Michigan. Yeah. It is so much different just a couple hours south of there that the spring is earlier and the fall is later. Like it is a big bump in my growing season.
That's what I was going to ask you. When do you usually plant? And then when is your usually first frost date?
I think it's basically 50-50 of frost on about May 15th. That's kind of the tipping point. But we almost never have frost at that point in my experience here.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, we had one really good one. And then this year we had a day that was close. Okay. But I usually plant by May 15th if the soil temperature is warm enough. That seems to make a difference. And the way our property is situated, that helps too, because most of our gardens, or the primary garden, which is the one near the house that I'll plant earlier, is on higher ground. So if it does get cold, the cold kind of travels down toward the ponds. And so we're less likely to get frost here.
Right.
And then we rarely have frost until October. I mean, we can get it in September and plenty of times, but I would say usually we don't.
That right there is basically 6 to 8 weeks more than what I have.
Yeah. I mean, I remember plenty of June frosts, early June frosts, first week of June.
Yeah.
Growing up, plenty of them.
Yeah.
And
we're further north than that even.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's fast and furious here. I love it here and I love the 4 seasons, but yeah, the growing season is certainly very short. Yeah,
that was so when I really expanded our gardens, probably in the last like 6 years or so, we've been growing a preposterous amount of tomatoes. And that was one of the biggest like ego boosts of my life when my grandparents asked if we had extra tomatoes so they could can some extra tomatoes, and they would come down like, middle of September, early September, and get, bushels of tomatoes and take them back home and can them. Having the people who taught me how to garden ask me for my surplus. I mean, I offered it to them for years and they didn't really, they needed some here and there, wanted some here and there, but then they made a big push because they'd gotten frost early. And that felt pretty good to be able to help them out. That's
really cool. That's
yeah.
Really cool. Well, I know that both of us were busy all day long, so I don't want to keep you much longer. Was there anything else that you wanted to add or talk about?
Oh, boy, I guess the only thing I'd really like to add, I could talk for hours. I talk to myself a lot. So when there's someone else, yeah. I just hope that people, when they're into homesteading, whether they're new or they've been at it for a while, really appreciate like the nuance and how much of a blessing it is just to have your hands and your mind and your heart occupied with something you truly enjoy. Because there are days when it feels like all you're doing is moving manure from one pile to another. But even then, like there's life in the soil, in that part of the soil, and just and it's one thing I try to really express to my kids is to appreciate the nuance of what you're doing and just appreciate the moment. It's just such a wonderful experience and a wonderful gift that there are people who never get to have their hands in the soil. Yeah. And I hope everyone, appreciates how blessed we are to have work to do.
That I couldn't say it better myself. And with that, I think we're going to end. And I'm thankful that you came on. And I do think that we could have a really long conversation. And maybe one day I'll be able to come down there and we can have a person-to-person conversation and like around a campfire or something. That would be amazing. But
let me know and I'll chill the mead.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jonah, for coming on. And with that, I will end with my normal grow where you're planted.
Looking around, I finally see I think I need a change. The rat race, I wanna flee, my world I'll rearrange. I'm getting back to the roots of how it's meant to be. Growing gardens, picking fruit, racing livestock, living free. It's a modern understand why I wanna live this way. They've never eaten from their land like we do here every day. Snapping beans like Grandma did, sitting on her front porch. Hunting and fishing like a kid once you've done all of your chores. It's a modern homestead. Build a modern homestead. Country or city, there's a way to make this change. You gotta start today.